Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr McCormack, for your opening statement. Can I just take you to an issue that we touched on at last estimate, which is colour vision deficient pilots? My understanding is that CASA has determined that the colour assessment and diagnosis, or CAD test, which was developed by the CAA in the UK, to be the appropriate test for the purposes of Reg 67.150(6)C. Is that correct?
The exact name of that test I'm not sure of, Senator. That's the only part I do not know. That's correct, Senator. I'm advised.
Okay. Who made that decision, and what was the basis of that decision?
I might ask my Executive Manager, Industry Permissions, to give you the background for that.
Thank you, Senator. In regards to the question
Thank you.
relating to the CAD test, CASA is looking into that as our third level of testing, as a possibility to use. We have not necessarily committed to using that test in all cases.
I've got a letter here dated 24th of January this year from CASA to a gentleman saying that CASA has determined the colour assessment diagnosis test to be an appropriate test for the purposes of the regulation, and it appears to be the test that CASA is now using to apply. My question is, in accordance with your letter, who made the decision that it's an appropriate test, and on what basis did they make that decision?
Well, it would have been for an individual occurrence. It's not across the board, because the test is, all testing for colour vision is on a case-by-case basis, and in terms of that decision, it would have been our principal medical officer.
Okay, but clearly at some point in time, somebody has decided that the test has a degree of efficacy that makes it worthwhile to use. My question is, who made that test, who made that decision, and on what basis?
It would be the basis of medical evidence of the test's validity, but we could provide notice on the actual details of why that approach was the appropriate one.
Okay, Mr Faraday, I've done my own research into the CAD, and I've gone back and researched the CAA documents and the Chief Medical Officer there and the background to the test, and the critical element they come down to in the test is that they believe one of the very few items of a pilot's work cycle, that there are no redundant cues, is the PAPI, which is I don't know if you're familiar, it's a night aid to get your glide slope. They believe that that is the critical test, and that the whole test revolves around determining whether they have a colour vision deficiency that would affect their ability to interpret those colours. Is that correct as far as you're aware?
Well, that's my understanding, but I'm not the expert in colour vision testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that I have is that since the Dennison case here in Australia, some 2 decades ago, we now have pilots with over 10,000 hours of flying, many of them single pilot night IFR, who've conducted countless night approaches using PAPIs as they have come online, as well as the TVASI, and there have been no incidents. No safety incidents, and we confirmed that last estimates between ATSB and CASA that there have been no incidents recorded. And so my question is, if we have 20 years of experience versus the UK, where it is essentially an academic development that proves that yes, somebody has a colour vision deficiency, where is the safety case that justifies the adoption of this test?
You mean changing from the Ishihara test to this CAD test?
Any of the tests that are essentially an academic determination that you have a colour vision deficiency, as opposed to the intent of 67150, which looks at what are the operational ways of testing whether this deficiency in fact affects your ability to safely operate an aircraft.
Yes. Thank you, Senator. I think you'll find that there has been a 727 crash in the United States which is attributed to the colour blindness of the co-pilot.
There is one incident, and that attribution has been disputed, particularly since the captain of the aircraft wasn't colour vision deficient and was also on the flight deck at the time, and the fact that PAPIs are well known to have distortion under certain atmospheric conditions, which is oft quoted as the real cause of that accident.
Yeah, so the academic literature does tend to cite that, and numerous maritime accidents, of course, with colour vision deficiency we're not particularly concerned about, I guess, at this moment. Yeah, colour vision testing under 671506C, CASA is empowered to determine the type of third-level testing to be applied. That CAD test, now that I've found my notes here, says that the colour assessment and diagnosis, CAD test, was developed by City University in London, and with research funding assistance from both the UK CAA and the US FAA. And it's been officially adopted, as you say, for use in the UK. And we believe that aviation-specific tests, such as that test, are better suited than the previous use practical tests for detecting colour vision deficiency due to their direct relevance to aviation-specific tasks. As far as a safety case goes around changing from the Ishihara or the colour plate test to some other test, we'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
Okay, Mr McCormick, my point though is that in an environment where the industry is struggling to attract and retain pilots, we have a whole cohort now in Australia who've been flying safely with no incidents, and that's been confirmed by ATSB and yourself, for the past 2 decades in Australia. And yet since the introduction of this CAD test, we are now seeing CASA withdrawing the privileges of pilots who have been flying for thousands of hours quite safely on the basis of a test that's been academically derived. Now, my question to you, what is the safety case for withdrawing the privileges of a licence of somebody who has demonstrated over a number of years and thousands of hours of flying that they can competently operate the aircraft?
I'm not aware of any specific cases. I'm assuming, as you say, there have been cases where we've withdrawn privileges, but I'm not aware of that myself. The issue about the eyesight test is, of course, that there is a standard which is applied by ICAO. We are already much more liberal than that standard anywhere in the world, and necessarily saying 20,000 hours, 10,000 hours represents therefore a valid safety case because it's been done 10,000 times is not necessarily the same thing as saying it's either 1 hour's experience 10,000 times or it's 10,000 hours experience as far as the events go themselves. So I think we're looking now at carefully moving forward, or in some cases, if this test, which seems to be adopted, well, it has been adopted by the UK CAA and is obviously under consideration by the FAA, we would look at moving to where as it says, the appropriate and sophisticated medical research methodologies have led. It's a mere fact of updating things. As for actually removing issues, I'll take that on notice. I don't know who we've removed privileges from.
Okay, well, I can give you the letter afterwards, but I've got it sitting right here in front of me from your organisation dated the 24th of January, doing exactly that. Okay. And can I put it to you, Mr Cormack, that with due respect, this is not moving forward, despite the evidence that you gave here at estimates in November, that CASA had no agenda or no plans to wind back the gains of the Denison case. This is, in fact, a very deliberate effort to adopt a standard which might medically ascertain that somebody does have a colour vision deficiency, but clearly, as evidenced by multiple pilots that have flown for over 2 decades, it is not an accurate or effective measure of their ability to safely operate an aircraft. So this is going backwards, not in fact forwards.
Well, Senator, as I say, what's happened between November when I was here and that letter, this is the first I do know of it. We were, of course, expecting to be in the AAT to respond to Mr O'Brien, which was within February 2012. However, those proceedings are currently not listed for hearing, as the previous hearing to commence on 31st of March was vacated at the applicant's request. So we haven't had the opportunity to test these things. But as I said, that's news to me. I will take it on notice and find out what actually we've been doing.
Okay. The CASA provide the option, for example, with hearing tests. If you go to the CASA website under hearing in para 6.3, talks about the option that if somebody fails the normal testing, an in-flight test may be offered if he or she has a high level of aeronautical experience, and such an operational check will involve evaluation of relevant aspects of the applicant's hearing by a CASA FOI or an authorised testing officer. Given that you already have an established precedent where somebody fails to meet a broadly recognised benchmark, Why is there not an equivalent test offered for somebody with colour vision deficiency, such that if they can prove, whether it be in a simulator or in a real aircraft, that they are quite capable of flying an aircraft by night to landing, and the CAA and the university that did that work identified that the PAPI was the one area where they felt there wasn't a redundant queue available to the pilot. Why is there not the option for a pilot to elect to have an alternate means of testing to demonstrate their competence, given that unlike the UK, we now have many pilots who have thousands of hours of operational experience to demonstrate they can safely operate the aircraft?
Well, Senator, I don't think it's been considered up till now, because with most other of the standards recommended procedures, these medical standards, colour vision deficiency is an absolute bar to commercial operations. So again, we're talking about evolving out somewhere else. I am still a bit hesitant to say that just because the person can interpret the PAPI this time, they will interpret it correctly the next time. And I'm not basing that on any medical science, I'm basing that on common sense. But the issue does still revolve around what medical experts say a person's colour vision ability is. We don't put ourselves in that position. And unfortunately, if these AAT hearing will eventually go ahead, I assume, we will be tabling evidence from experts about that particular individual's ability to differentiate red and green.
Well, if you want to come back to experts, your organisation's previous experts, Liddell, Brock, Wilkins and others, were very proactive in recognising that practical tests were a viable alternative, and in fact that many people with a CVD were able to fly. Their judgment has proven correct by virtue of the incident-free 20 years of flying. So, Mr McCormick, is it the case that a personality has changed, not the science, not the safety, a personality has changed, and now CASA's approach to this issue is changing?
I'm not aware of any changes around our approach to this, Senator. As I said, that letter is news to me. I'm not across everything that leaves the building, but particularly in medical matters, I normally don't involve myself. We'll take it on notice, and I'll find and get you an answer about exactly what has transpired.
Okay, well, I'd appreciate if you take that on notice. I will also be seeking further information about CASA's plans in terms of the adoption of the CAD test, and I'd also like an answer on notice on whether you will consider an equivalent to the audio test, an in-flight or a simulator-based test for people who have a recognised CVD, and I'm sure the CAD test is an absolutely thorough, 100% accurate test to prove that someone has a CVD. The critical question for industry and for individuals' careers is, does that have an impact on their ability to safely operate the aircraft? And I would look forward to your answer on notice as to whether you will adopt an approach that will give an equivalent avenue for those pilots with a practical test versus just the theoretical one. Thanks, Chair.
Can I just follow up with a supplementary question on that from Senator Forsyth's line of questioning? So you do acknowledge, given Senator Forsyth's line of questioning, that the key criteria should be the ability to safely operate an aircraft, not the mere fact of having a colour vision deficiency, that it needs to be looked at in the context of the ability to safely operate an aircraft?
Yes, thank you, Senator. I think the ability to safely operate the aircraft is what has got us to where we are now compared to where other nations are that don't permit commercial operations with colour vision deficiencies. So as I said to Senator Forsyth's question, that's the first it's been suggested to me that we have a look at a practical test, and I think it's got merit. We'll have a look at it and see what we come back to.
Sure, thank you.